Hey Mark, how you doing?
Hi, Mirella. I'm doing great. And I'm about 9 episodes into my podcast and I'm going live. And I can't think of a better person to go live with than you. And for those that are going to be clicking on this on YouTube or iTunes or wherever they find it, this is Mirella Scalise. Did I say your last name right? Because
You did, thank you.
picky about I'm very picky about how I say people's names and spell them. So,
I'm the same
hopefully,
way.
but Morella is. I'm actually looking at your LinkedIn profile. I love this. 100% leader, 50% rebel, and frankly, from what I know about you, I feel like that's an accurate description.
Okay, I was gonna say maybe more like 75%, 80% rebel, but we'll go with 50%. I wanted to be a little conservative for LinkedIn, you know?
You didn't want to give yourself too much of a rep, I guess.
You know what? Rebels can be very positive. Rebels can be disruptive, but very positive at the same time. That is me. That is me.
That is you. And the reason that's you is, man, you got a long resume. You are host and producer of the Anything Goes show podcast. There's
Right?
one with your daughter
Yes.
and one that's just business oriented. I see
Yes.
you on my feed all the time. You also are a marketer, you're a brand mentor, you work with social media strategy, you're a businesswoman. And if Shaka Khan was here, she would say you're every woman because you've got a whole lot of stuff
Let's just
going
say
on.
that.
And I can't
I do.
I
Thank
can't
you. And
wait
Mark, thank you
to
so much. I was going to say, before we go on, thank you so much for being me on your podcast tonight. I really, really appreciate that immensely.
well, when I started this podcast, it's very much leaning towards talking about career transitions and the journey that people go along in order to go from a 9 to 5 job to having your own career in business, something that reflects you very wholly.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was planning and prepping this podcast, you were definitely like very high on my list just because
Oh, thank
we had
you.
that awesome phone conversation last year where we just talked and got to know each other and we're talking about a writing project. But really what I remember most is just getting to know you and talking to you and just how amazing you are and your journey. And you're a lot of what I want to become because I'm still working 9 to 5, but I'm also doing a podcast and I'm trying to work on my own brand. And you know a whole lot about branding. And obviously, as you put it, you are 18 months into corporate retirement. And
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes they keep trying to get me back in there, once
do
in a
they
while.
really? Do they still call you?
It's interesting. Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much. You are so kind. Just very, very sweet. Thank you so much for the kind words. I really, really appreciate it immensely. Yeah, it's actually comical only because I was in the corporate world for a very, very, very long time, and I'm very proud of my career in corporate. And when I walked away from it, and I took some much needed time off, when I reemerged, I knew I wanted to do something. And you often hear people talking about their passion and their purpose and what have you. But I've often said this too. I wanted to do something that would leave a legacy, something that I would be very proud of, that would leave a legacy of importance, in the message and the medium of what we're trying to do and trying to talk about. And so, yeah, it's been 18 months and I've been, grinding, and I've been doing my putting in the work. And when I was still sending resumes, and a few companies would, connect with me, or I would connect with a few contacts, it was a little bit harder, I would say, to try to get back in, just because it really is about who you know in a lot of cases within the industries, But lately, with the COVID-19 and this pandemic going on, one would think that there aren't a lot of jobs. One would think that companies aren't hiring. One would think that things have actually slowed down. I've actually found the reverse. I found that companies have been calling me, recruiters, friends of mine, connections have been calling me to talk about potential special projects, contract work, helping them to ramp up their marketing and branding, because they've lost a lot of momentum over the last couple of months,
Yeah, I've heard that from a couple of people in the same position as you. They feel like they're busier now than they ever were.
Yeah.
And that's just a reflection of the situation you're in. And you're already like established. So it's not like COVID-19 happened. You're like, well, I gotta do something because I can't go to work. You were already established. So you were way ahead of the game. And one thing before we talk about now, I want to just go back in time and hop in the DeLorean for a minute and
Hop in the DeLorean. Let's do it. Okay.
hop in with Marty McFly and Einstein, the dog. And let's talk about the moment that you said, and it doesn't have to necessarily be down on corporate. I'm not necessarily like, even though my theme is career transition, I'm not necessarily down on corporate, but I know we all go through our ups and downs. It can be a real jungle working in corporate. You have so many different personalities and things going on, and it may not even be because of all that. It could just be you internally. But when did you get to the point where you said, you know what I'm doing is great, but I feel like I have more to offer than just doing the corporate life? Like, what actually got you started, and how long did it take you to get to the point that you were able to go into corporate retirement? Probably everybody's dream.
So first of all, such a great question. And second of all, I'm always the one asking the question, so it feels a little weird tonight. Tables are turned.
Well, you can ask me some questions.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, you know what? I was in corporate for, I'm going to age myself, but I was in corporate for the likes of about 35 years. And I would say that it probably took me 35 years to decide that it was time for me to walk away from it. And I'm really, really proud of the career that I had. And yes, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of different landmines you've got to navigate. There are a lot of politics. There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of, different personalities. There's a lot of groups. There's a lot of, I worked with a lot of fantastic people. But I also worked in an industry that was very much monopolized by acquisitions and mergers, right? And so that had a very big effect on my decision to leave, because when companies buy out or buy smaller companies and they're integrating, yeah, it might look really great on the bottom line with the clients and the revenues, but the one thing that suffers is the people. And companies have to look at redundancies, and companies have to look at where there's duplication, and companies have to look at who do we need and who do we don't, or who don't we need, And I'm very people centric. So even though I'm a businesswoman, I'm very people centric. And for me, it got to the point where I was just tired of watching fantastic, good people being walked out the door, for whatever reason that the companies wanted to give them. And it can be very defeating. And I love people. So I work in an environment where I bring people together for the greater good of business, right? And I think, what's the saying? Together, we're a lot stronger than if we're divided. So all of a sudden, people are being walked out the door. It was always about profits over people. And I just started to get a little tired of it. So I decided I needed a break. I wasn't taking any vacation. They were always paying me out at the end of the year, which is crazy. I really should have taken the time off. I was a workaholic. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to walk away. I'm going to take some time to decompress. And when I did come back as an entrepreneur, I realized, I always knew this, that I could, by being my own boss, I could affect more positive change of helping people, and no one was going to stop me, right? When companies start to say, I don't want you helping people, I don't need you helping people, you need to be focused on that, there's a problem with that.
Yeah, I'm having deja vu. I feel like this is some of the topics we talked about last year. And that was one of the things that really impressed me about you, was just how much you cared about people, and how that really was a driving force for you to take a different path. And you actually say one thing on your LinkedIn profile that I love, that I was going to ask you this question, but I think you actually defined it. You say you're a heart-centered businesswoman.
Yes.
And I feel like you just defined what that is just in that explanation, because so when you work in corporate America, I feel like as much as people might care about each other, there's always like that line that, you gotta still kind of look out for yourself. It can be kind of like a little bit of a game. And I feel like you running the show, and I know that just from doing this podcast, it's like, it's all about me, basically. I mean, I always tell people that the episodes themselves are about them, which it is, but that's a part of my philosophy, is that, I'm in control, and that's how I control it, by giving the guests the power, which you can't always do that in a corporate setting. There's always that line, and I don't know if you agree with that, but that's kind of how I see it, where you can only look out for people so much, where with this, I'll look out for my guests or whoever I'm collaborating with, like, all the way, and then some.
You know what, you know me very well. First of all, anyone that knows me knows that I don't really appreciate being handcuffed, and being stifled in being creative and being able to do what I do best. And a lot of times what happens is, when things are moving at a slower pace and you're having meetings to have meetings about having meetings, the creativity is not a priority. And it can be very stifling, and it can be very frustrating, right? But when you talked about having the control to look after your team or not, before I left, and I'm not saying this because, I need, I need a medal or anything. I say it because I'm proud of this. And of course, it was exactly the right thing that needed to be done. And this is the way that I operate anyway. Before I left, there was a lot of upheaval within my teams. I was looking after 12, 15 people, and they were scared, and they were like, am I going to have a job? Because we had acquired a lot of companies, and there was a lot of redundancies, and they're like, my husband's sick, I need this job, or I have to work, or something else is coming up, or I have a mortgage, and people just were afraid of losing their jobs. Anyway, I made sure that every single person on my team landed in some position somewhere. I made sure of that because I was their manager, I was their leader, and it was my responsibility to make sure that that happened. And when I knew, now after I left, whatever happened after that, you can't control. But when I knew that everybody had a spot, then I knew I could leave.
And that's really what it comes down to, is just, when you're working independently, it just frees up so much more. And I know one thing that you mentioned that I really thought about a lot, especially once I had control over it. And that is the key word, is creativity. So I feel like a lot of people feel like they don't really have a whole lot of power to be creative. Whereas when you're taking on your own product like you or I are doing, it opens up the world and then some. And one of the things I'm curious about, because I know how it was for me, but when you left your job and you were basically kind of like thinking about the next thing, what kind of revelation did you have when you realized, wow, I have so much power to be creative, so much more than I'm used to? What was
Right.
that like for you?
It was, it was amazing. And it was also kind of like I was in the twilight zone, right? Because all of a sudden I went from, being a box on an org chart, right? And having a title and having, dictated what the job description was and what have you. And that's okay, right? I mean, there's a place and a time for that. But at the same time, when I realized that, I could set the tone and the stage for building my own brand and building my own business, and I could make my own hours, even though I probably worked more than I did in corporate, and I worked a lot in corporate, and I could meet different people, and I could, build the marketing strategy and the campaigns and direct my business the way that I wanted to. Oh my goodness, it was absolutely liberating. It was like something just like I had been freed. Do you know what I mean? And that my
Yeah.
mind and that my creativity had been freed. And when that happens, you can actually unblock a lot of the different things that are holding you back from being effective working in the culture that I was working in.
So what exactly was the first move when you said, you know what, I want to work for myself? Like what was like the 0 point, like the ground zero? That's a terrible thing to say, but I couldn't think of anything else. What was
I
like
understand.
the
The
start?
breaking point, you mean?
Well, what was the starting point where you started the blueprint to where you're at now?
I'm going to answer that question, but as you and I discussed, you said that I could acknowledge a few folks that were watching, so we're going to do just that if you don't
Oh
mind.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All
let's
right.
do it.
And then I'm going to answer your question. Lorena is on. Hi, Lorena. How are you? Tonight, the tables are turned. Mark Schmidt is interviewing me. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have Fiona Strong watching. Carolyn. Hi, Carolyn. How are you? We've got Jessica. And really appreciate it. The point for me, Mark, was really simple. It was, I realized that life was just too short, and I'm not going to say that the career that I had was soul sucking. I'm not going to. Am I still live? I think I am still live.
Yeah,
Are we back?
I think so. I kind of lost you there for a second in the middle
I'm
of
so
that.
sorry. Zoom
That's
has been
okay.
so temperamental these days because everybody is on it. So I'm glad that we're back here. Anyway, all I was saying was that the point for me was, realizing that life is too short, and we want to live life to the fullest, right? And I'm not going to say that my career was soul sucking, because it wasn't. There were times when it was. There were points in my career when it was. And after 30, 35 years, I was like, okay, you know what? It's time for me to spread my wings, because I felt that if I continued like this, what was left? I was going to like get my watch, and maybe if they gave me a watch, and I was going to retire, and then what, you know? And I decided that I wanted to, I didn't want to get to that point. I wanted to break free from that. And I wanted to build my own brand and my own business. And as I said earlier, my own legacy. That was the breaking point. You know, after 30, 35 years, you get to a point where you're like, I think I'm done. I think I'm done.
I wonder what that says for me, because I've really only been working in corporate America for about 15 years. And I think by about the 10 or 12-year point, I was like, boy, that's enough. But,
You feel, see, the thing is, when you start to feel restless, right? When you start to feel restless and you start to question, you know, do I really want to be waking up to going in? You know, the saying, if you're not enjoying waking up, going into work, and you're dreading it, you know that you're in the wrong job, right? If you start to feel restless, it doesn't matter if it's been 12 years or 12 months or 5 minutes, chances are it's telling us we need to make a change, right?
and that's really where I was at. So I took a buyout package from my former company. I was with them actually 10 years to the day that they set for giving out the buyout packages. It was like a cutoff point. So my very first day with the company, they went back to that day and said, if you've been here 10 years or more, that's the day. So first of all, I always thought that was pretty crazy. But by that point, and especially I didn't know what direction I was going in after all that, after being with the same company. But I had all this time between that job and the next one, and I really thought about it. And I was like, you know, this is like my time. I guess I was reflecting a lot on, you know, dreams that I had. Like I wanted to write a story about my time in high school, something that I'm still only like a quarter of the way done with after 3 years. But
You'll get
but
there though. You don't get there.
yeah, I appreciate that. I just had a dream of like writing scripts and doing stuff like that, which is part of the reason I got into TV production. But along the way, I realized that I wasn't actually doing that. I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, and that was my focus. I was like, well, once I climb to a certain point, or once I get to a certain point, then that'll open up the door for me to do all this creative stuff. But I
Right.
realized that, wow, I was with that company for 10 years. I left and I didn't get there. And there were so many things, you know, I was getting kind of close to 40 at that point. I'm like, I need to start doing some of this stuff. And even doing something like this, public speaking, even though it's not public speaking, this is something I've always wanted to do. Realize I hadn't really built the foundation for that either. So,
And it's interesting you say that, Mark, because, you know, that's exactly it for me. At one point, I was sitting there, I kid you not, and I asked myself, like, I was signing off requisitions for holidays, and I was signing off requisitions for, you know, promotional items, and I was signing off things, and I was, because I was managing people and I was making sure that things were running smoothly. But I remember asking myself, when was the last time I created something? When was the last time I developed, you know, a campaign, or I drafted a template, or I put any color on paper? When was the last time I did that? Because remember, I have a journalism background, but I've also got like the marketing and the communications and the branding, right? And the business development. So I just felt like I had stopped creating, and that wasn't what I was getting into. And so you start to ask yourself, is this really where I want it to be? So when people start to say, oh, I want to get to there, be careful where you want to get to, because once you get there, it might not actually be what you want, you know?
oh yeah, and that's something that I've learned along the way. And I know I feel like I wanted to say this before some of the technical difficulties, and I want to make this point if I haven't. But when I was a manager, the number one thing that I learned at the job that I was at before the buyout was a lot of people feel like they're not using their creativity in their roles. And I have worked most of my career in very technical jobs, very like A to B, point A, point B type of things where there's not a whole lot of room for creativity, but it can be created if you put your heads together and really think about it. But it really woke me up. And I think it's one of the things that inspired me to take on some of these projects, like trying to write the book finally, trying to create the blog that I have, which occasionally I still write a blog. I feel like the poor blog has gotten kicked to the curb. But
are you going to revisit it? Are you going to get started again on it?
I just posted something a few weeks ago, and it's about my journey during the pandemic so far, because I'm considered a essential employee where I work. I'm basically keeping like 300 or 400 radio channels on the air and keeping everybody entertained during all this madness. And it's been a really interesting experience just going through this process of all this stuff like hitting me like pretty much literally in the face with all the changes and the suspension of all the sports leagues and everything else. And I had some time off for a few weeks, and I just sat down and really poured my heart into it. And for your audience, and hello to everybody who's watching, I didn't get a chance to say hi, but
hi everybody. Hi. Yes, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, hi and thank you. And that blog is markymarksworld.blog if you want to check that out. And I wish I would have called it Mark My Words. I didn't get the idea for Mark My Words.
I like that, Mark My Words. That's very catchy. I like it.
I could not come up with it though. It was actually a Twitter follower, a fellow blogger, very early on when I first started my blog. They're like, a great name for your blog would have been Mark My Words. It's like, oh, I should have thought of that.
But listen, everyone's going to think that they're going to get Mark Wahlberg when they come to yours, Marky Mark. So that's not a bad thing either.
And that's something that a few people have brought up. They're like, hey, aren't you worried about like copyright and they're going to come and shut down your site? I'm like, not really, because I'm not trying to be him or take anything away from him, nor do I think I could. But
it's okay. You keep doing what you're doing. You keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm just doing my thing. But but anyway, I just I think that was a wake-up call for me when all these people, and I'm the one kind of like trying to come up with projects to get people to be more creative and, to make them feel valued in that way. And it was a real wake-up call for me personally, because I'm like, I need to be more creative. And that is really the root of where projects like this came from. And it's incredibly gratifying for me. And I know, or I don't actually know because I didn't ask the question yet, but
but you're going to.
I'm going to do it right now. So, as a host and producer of 2 podcasts, I gotta believe, because I know this is, I think, the 9th episode of my podcast, and I know how extremely gratifying every one of these conversations have been, and how like amazing it makes me feel to connect with people on this level. And I just want to ask if that's something that you get out of your podcast? And were you expecting to get anything like that? And really, I'll just add this one, it's like 10 billion questions,
It's
but
okay.
were you expecting to get, like, what exactly were you expecting to get out of it is what I want to ask.
Okay,
All
well,
three of those
listen,
things.
those are all great questions. Yes, all great questions. Thank you. First of all, the anything goes movement, and that it is a movement. I always say this, it's not just a show, it's not just a segment, it's not just a podcast. It is so much more. It is a movement, it is a feeling, it is about community, it is about coming together, it's about taking a stand, making a stand about something, you know? And for me, what I really love about, first of all, it's very gratifying, very, very gratifying. The fact that I could do the original Thursday night show with my daughter, Julia, especially gratifying because we have that family dynamic that we bring to it, along with the supporting community of people on social media and, you know, everywhere in the world. And we emulate our love of dance and music and laughter and comedy through these crazy times, you know, with candid conversations. And we talk about all kinds of topics and issues, and we really bring them to the forefront. We don't talk too much about religion and politics. We try to stay away from those, but everything else is you know, open for discussion. And one thing that I think makes our podcast very unique is that me and Julia, we bring ourselves and what we've been through right into everyone's homes. On Thursday night, we talk about, you know, our crazy dates. We talk about, you know, dealing with depression and mental health. We talk about grieving the loss of a loved one. We talk about career transition and difficulties and all kinds of things, that obstacles. You know, we talk about these things, and we bring so many fantastic guests along for the ride that come in and join us. And then of course, all the people that watch. So it's just become this beautiful, beautiful thing. So yes, very, very gratifying for sure. And of course, I spun off the original show into a business series on Tuesday nights, where we're talking about still the same amount of silliness and fun, except that we bring a lot of discussion around whether it be careers, recruitment, the job market, health, fitness, you know, the mental mindset. We talk about dating, relationships, we talk about entrepreneurship, startups, and things like that. And did I expect it to be the way that it was? You know what? I was hopeful that people would love it and care about it as much as I do and as much as we do. And the only way I knew that people could care about it is if they embraced what we were doing, embraced our message and embraced us, right? And I knew that it was going to be a real healing power and journey for me and my daughter. And from the, you know, testimonials that we get and the messages we get every single week, it seems like we're on the right track. You know, we've probably done, I don't know, this is a guesstimate. We celebrated our 50th show back in February, and we haven't stopped even during this pandemic because we're doing the at-home editions. And so between both podcasts, I think we're probably at 70, 80 shows now, maybe more. So it's absolutely wonderful.
That's pretty amazing. And I mean, I know with my busy schedule, I don't always get tuned in, but I have found your podcast, when I do, to be very entertaining and fun and informational. And I think you're doing incredible things, which is why I wanted to do on my podcast. And
Thank you so much.
One thing that I don't know if you're moving Boulders out of my way part of your business.
You saw that on my LinkedIn profile, did you?
I did. I'm looking at it right now because that's how I roll. But
that's how I roll. Exactly. Did you want to know what that meant? Why I wrote that down?
Well, I feel like a lot of what you're saying ties into this, and this is a part of your business I don't know a whole lot about, but if you can elaborate, and you use words so well. I love the way you use words. But
thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so moving Boulders out of my way was both a literal and figurative, you know, terminology, because if you think about sometimes, like I said earlier on the podcast, feeling very handcuffed, and stifled, that you can't do the things that you want to do, even though you believe that they're the right decisions, even though you're more than capable of doing it. There's always someone that's telling you, not now, not today, not this. And it can be very, you feel very defeated, and you feel like, well, what am I here for then, you know? And so boulders can be situations, they can be environmental, they can be people, they can be your feelings, your own feelings about things, right? And so I spent several months moving those heavy, heavy boulders, you know, out of my way, very sore shoulders if you think about the whole premise behind it, you know. But when I did that and I had a clear view and a clear path, then I was ready to take my business and launch it and start it. And my business is, it's a number of different streams. Like the shows came first, actually, even though they weren't even part of my business strategy, you know. And then we built the business and the brand strategy around the shows. But you know, I focus on everything to do with, and there's like 3 or 4 different pillars, maybe 5. But everything from, you know, helping develop leaders and managers, and you know, the whole culture around true authentic leadership by example, right? And there's also the social media, branding, marketing, strategy side of things. I do all of that along with my daughter Julia, who does a lot of the graphic design, video, you know, editing and creation. So anything to do with, you know, all of that. Then there's also the business side of things. You know, I write business plans. I help businesses start. I do marketing plans. I help marketing, like refresh and rebrands of marketing strategies. I'm a copywriter. I'm a content creator. So there's that. And then on the other side of the coin, there's the life and the motivational side of things, where I help people. So, you know, I don't call myself a coach or a consultant, you know, I just am. Like, I just am me, and by extension of getting to know people, I help people, right? So there's that, and just helping people through career transition, whether it be, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, or I'm 50 now and I need a change, or I just lost my job. Where do I start? How am I going to get out of this? I've just been fired. How do I even look for a job? Things like this. Or if they've gone through some life catalysts, you know, that they need some motivation and assistance on, right? And these are all these different streams are based on not only my skills and my expertise and my experience, but actual, you know, I draw from my own life, what I've been through, you know?
So if you're not a coach, or you don't define yourself as a coach, how would you define yourself? Would you say like consultant or advisor? Or you have so many great word choices. You probably have a great word.
You know
I
what I
haven't.
call myself? You know what I call myself on my resume when I list my company? I list myself as Chief Advocate Officer.
Very well put. I had to expect something that good.
Because I advocate for people, and I advocate for improvements, and I advocate for better ways, and I advocate, I don't follow the popular vote all the time. And sometimes you've got to make the difficult decisions, and that doesn't mean following the crowd, right? And an advocate is someone that you know, has a tough job, but is a job that I'm very, very proud of, for sure.
And one thing I'm learning as we talk here, all these words and just knowing your story, it all ties back to what I think is you at your core. And it just feels so authentically expressed. And I feel like that's something that people are craving more and more, is authenticity. And I almost don't even want to ask this because I think we know the answer. Do you feel like that's something that you bring to the table?
That's the only thing I bring to the table. Everything else is a spillover from that, you know. And it's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. Interestingly enough, right? We've all been there. We're sitting there. We're trying to develop a brand or a campaign or some catchy, you know, tagline. And when I started out on my own, you know, journey, and I was thinking about I wanted to present myself. I mean, I wanted to present myself as me. This is me. But, you know, what's my brand? What's my product? What's my position on things? How do I want people to know me? And I couldn't think of anything else other than me. I'm going to present myself as honest, truthful, raw, real, and relatable, right? And that's it. And when you think about that as a differentiator, what does that tell you about, you know, the state of the union, right? I felt that, not that I came on the scene and people were craving something fresh, as opposed to, you know, others. I came on the scene and I thought, you know what? I think people are yearning that there's a little bit more purity and honesty in business and in social media and the way that we interact with one another. Do you know what I mean? And in my dealings with people and getting to know the communities, I'm not wrong about that.
And so did you know when you started everything up that your background in marketing was going to be like so integral to your success?
Yes, I knew that marketing was going to be a big part of it. I knew that my business experience obviously was going to be a big part of it. I also studied psychology a few semesters in college, and I also knew the psychology end of it was going to be a big part of it because, you know, we got to remember that most business decisions, if not all business decisions, are based on the sustainability of people and the decisions that are made by people with people, right? And the psychology of people is a very interesting dynamic, of course, and how relationships are formed and business decisions are made. So yes, I absolutely knew that it was going to be integral in the whole thing.
So interesting to listen to you talk about just the book smart side of all this, because when I think about myself, I have to admit, I don't read like much at all. You know, I read articles on my phone and, you know, I read social media. There's a Blondie song that I'm thinking of where they talk about being a sidewalk social scientist. And
Right.
there's another song that I can't even think of. I want to say it's Mandy Moore, but I can't remember. But the other one is like Pocket Philosopher. I almost feel like those two things describe kind of like a part of what I bring to the table, because I feel like I'm more just not so much like reading up and I'm a fan of this or that, or like your background is just amazing, because for me, my whole background is being technical and being, you know, just A to B. Everything else that I have is all kind of like life experience. So,
Right.
and I know you bring a lot of that, but how much would you say is more life experience versus all of the education and book smarts? Like, what do you think outweighs the other for you?
I would say that the life experience and the ability to learn lessons through involvement with people and colleagues and understanding the way that certain structures and processes work, how they associate with people, right? And how people work together or not in team environments, I think weighs very heavily on the way that business is conducted or not conducted. And for me, I weigh very heavily on the landscape of people and the interactions and bringing community together and that whole sort of like leadership by example, right? The education is important, of course. All of the years of knowledge gained and experience and learning the trades and learning certain crafts and learning certain skills and how it all works. Of course, that's very important. I mean, if I didn't learn Word or PowerPoint, I would not be able to put together a Word, or PowerPoint document, of course, right? But it's not always about that. Often it's about, working with people, understanding the gel of the vibe of the groups, the strengths of people, and how it all comes together for the greater goal, right? Because if you think about it, working together or not working together is a make or break, right? The same could be said for skills. That's why a lot of times, like when I was working in the like in the corporate world for years, HR would often, volunteer to take on the hiring for me, and I would often be like, you know what, post the jobs for sure, but I will set up all the appointments, because to get through my calendar, it's going to be a logistical nightmare. I might as well do it anyway, right? And then at the same time, it was also it was also not only I will do the administration of that and the coordination of the meetings, but I'm also going to interview the people. So a lot of times the candidates would come in and they'd be very surprised to see me on the first interview, right? But I'm not a proponent of 5 interviews. For me, it's yes, education and experience is very important, but I'm always looking for those life skills, right? The drivers, those passions, the eagerness. So there's so many other things that are very, very important. So I learned that early on, and then I translate that into the later part of my career as well. It's very, very paramount for sure.
I agree with that. I mean, having those life skills and just bringing that side of you to the table, just that authenticity, I feel like is so important in anything that you do. And I know that's something that I really value as well. So, and obviously not surprised that you do. And
Well, thank you. Yeah, like that's always been my mantra. And you know what? It's not just about work and business. It's about friendships. It's about family dynamics. It's about relationships. It's about everything in the way that we conduct ourselves. That's why for me, a lot of the times you'll hear me write about life and work and everything in between, right? Because it's not just about work. It's not just about life. I mean, look at this pandemic, right? You cannot say, well, it's just this, and it doesn't affect all of this other stuff. It all affects, everything is related, you know? And so for me, I remember back in my day, even my parents' generation, you know, it was kind of like, oh, if you have problems at home, you don't take them to work. If you've got problems at work, you don't take them home, right? But nowadays it's very, very different. And of course, you know, I'm so happy to see more companies putting emphasis on mentally healthy, positive, healthy workplaces and things like that. People and what they're going through at home affects their jobs, and vice versa, you know. And so me as you know, as a manager and as just a colleague and a collaborator with people, I've always said, you know what, health is number one. Health and family. Take care of health and family, and the work will be there. And you know what, when you take care of your employees and you take care of people, they bring it back 100-fold into the productivity of things. It's always been that way.
And what you just said there about what you were taught about how to approach work, that's pretty much exactly what I was taught. So I personally can say there was a lot of rewiring in my head over the years, because I think I realized at one point, like, it's not really about just going to work and coming home. And you know, there's always, like, at least in the corporate world, there's always some kind of like line that's still there, but you almost, I think it goes a long way when you show people that you actually like really do care about their well-being. I know for me, it goes like a really long way. So
And it's very fulfilling. It's very fulfilling as a person, you know. You spend so many hours at the job that you want it to mean something. You want it to reflect something. You want to show something for it at the end of the day, right? Otherwise, why are we here? Why are we doing this? And it always, like I said earlier, and I'll say it again, it comes back to legacy, you know. Otherwise we're just punching the time card, and you know, we're going home, and then we're going to, you know, sleep, and then we're repeating the next day. I really wanted to break the cycle, you know, and that's, I think, why later on in my life, because, you know, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are 15 years old, right? I became an entrepreneur at how old? 53. So, you know, mind you, one could argue that I was always an entrepreneur. I was always doing my own thing within the greater, larger scope of the companies I worked with. I was always involved in something, but to really own this baby and call it my own, yeah, you know, and this is my chapter 2 right now. That's where we're at.
Well, speaking of your chapter 2, just to help round this home here, because we've been talking for almost an hour.
It's gone by so fast.
It's gone by really fast.
It just flew by, Mark.
It did. Well, one thing that I want to know is, what does the future hold for you? Like, what do you see coming up next for your business?
That's a great question. Well, for one thing, I've been trying to do my taxes for the last 2 months since being at home, and I have not been able to. So I'm hoping I can finish those. But I'm really hoping to expand the Anything Goes brand. I don't know what that looks like, if it means expanding different sort of branches of the segments that I do. But I'm also going to be releasing. I was actually on the cusp of it. I started announcing this just about the time when we had the lockdown, but I'm going to be starting to release and launch a few Anything Goes type of workshops and courses and programs and seminar type things around all different types of things to help people, whether they be, you know, brand new, you know, entrepreneurs and startup businesses, small business owners, you know, larger companies. I also am going to start, obviously I do a lot online, and I'm going to continue doing things online. You know, it really is all about bringing people together. I've got a few book projects on the go. I'm really excited about that. Again, it's about sharing my voice, but sharing my story in the hopes that it'll, you know, continue to help other people. And, you know, I'm always doing something on social media. So I want to really continue to branch out, you know, in Toronto and then the greater Toronto area and Ontario and perhaps across the country. So I have a few business model plans in the works around what, you know, I'm doing right now. But, you know, the one thing I want to say is that Rome wasn't created in a day. It took like 6 days. And so a lot of times people think that, oh, you know, I should have been this farther ahead. It's been 30 days or 6 months. The reality is that it's a constant, it's consistent, it takes years, but you keep putting in the work and you keep it consistent, and ultimately all the chess pieces will start to make sense, you know?
Yeah, I do. I know exactly what you're saying. And one thing you said earlier that really struck me as you're talking about all the great stuff that you have planned is, I know for me, as I've gone along on my journey, I've said, okay, if this project is successful or if this catches on or whatever the case is, like, I've always had something going on in my head as far as like, okay, if this happens, then I'm going to do this, I'm going to expand to that. Was that going on with you when you started the podcast? Did you say, okay, if this podcast does well, I'm going to create workshops, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that? Was that the kind of thing that was going on in your mind?
Not necessarily. I had a vision, I had a plan that I wanted to diversify. And this is the thing, you know, I'm a proponent of sticking to 1 or 2 or 3 things and then working from there and building out, I think is the best premise. At least that's what I have found in my career. So for me, I wanted to obviously educate, and I wanted to teach, and I wanted to, you know, consult, and I wanted to, you know, give my 35 years of you know, business lessons and life lessons to people, right? So I wanted to do all of this, and I had it all mapped out, but then the shows came first, right? And that wasn't really part of the plan. So when the opportunity came up to do them, and I put, you know, my heart and soul into them, my daughter does as well, and all the segment co-hosts and the people that support us, right? Like I said, it's a 24-hour thing. Like, it doesn't, it's just a beautiful thing that people come together to support and to watch. So I built the strategies around the show, but the beautiful thing about it is, instead of me saying, Mark, go visit my website so you can get to know me, you can listen to me and get to know me in the comfort of your own home or on your phone or on your laptop every single week, right? And by extension of that, then you can determine if I know what I'm talking about or not, or if I'm personable, if I relatable, if I, you want to work with me, if you want to collaborate with me, if you want to get some advice. So that started happening, right? And I started to reach a lot of people. And then by extension of that, then I can share my message with more people.
Well, that's everything right there in a nutshell. One thing that I compare from our conversation last year and this episode, and then just looking at your LinkedIn and some of the notes you sent me, like, wow, I really do know this person.
You do. You really do. And I haven't even scratched the surface yet. Like, what I mean by that is that I have conversations with a lot of people, and I try to give nuggets of information and advice and this and the how-tos and do it this way, but I haven't actually really gotten to the heart and soul of, okay, let's do it like this, and this is what it looks like, and A to Z. And that's part of my plan, obviously, to get it going, because these are all tried and tested and true principles. And one thing I'm going to say is that while social media and digital marketing is absolutely paramount, make no mistake, learning old school and then translating it into a technology, world, I think there's a benefit in merging both worlds. And that's exactly what I've done.
Well, before we wrap up, and speaking of what you've done, what bit of advice should somebody who wants to create their own business, whether it is a podcast, a blog, or social marketing, what piece of advice do you have for people that they haven't done anything or just dreaming about it?
Sure. I would say, first of all, decide what you stand for. Decide what you're all about and what you can offer. And you might be great at 10 things. Focus on maybe one or two things firstly, and start to network on social media and start to meet people and start to connect with people subtly and slowly. I always believe in slow and steady wins the race. I also believe in focusing on the long game, which is very hard for some people, because in the world of instant gratification, where we're a click away from everything, when you talk to people about, oh, it's going to take 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, they're like, I don't want to hear that. I need it in 2 days. The reality is that sales cycles and marketing cycles, and revenue cycles, they take months and months, because it takes time to build those relationships with those people that you want as your customers and your clients, right? So continue to show up as your authentic, real self all the time. Smoke shows will eventually be discovered, and there's too many of them out there. Just be real, be you. People will like you for you. Have something to say, stick with it, always be truthful about it, share your experiences. But again, I have to say, decide what you stand for and what's your brand going to be. A lot of times what happens is, and I've seen this, well, I'm going to just, and I'll use this analogy, throw spaghetti on 10 walls and something's got to stick and something's got to happen. Maybe so, but that's not really the way that you want to market. You want to be very strategic. You want to be very methodical in your thought process, and you want to connect with people genuinely, and you want to get to know them. And the one thing I would really love to say, if I may, we've all seen it. Instead of connecting with someone, whether it be on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or all three, and the minute that the connection happens, you're sending them, links to your website, links to your this, links. Don't do that, because that's a real turnoff, and people want to get to know you first. You might not even know if it applies to them, if it's relevant. Get to know what their needs are, get to know what they need, if anything, from you. Build that relationship, and then you get one client, and then you get word of mouth and testimonials and referrals, and it starts to grow from there. But keep it consistent. The last thing I'd like to say is, market when you're busy. And this is a real, sometimes people don't get this, you know, people think, oh, I'm busy, I'm making money hand over fist, and I don't, but you know what? If markets crash or you don't diversify your portfolio and something happens and all of a sudden you lose your clients in one area, what are you going to do? Then you got to ramp up and start over again. So you market when you're busy and you also market when you're not busy. It's kind of a simultaneous thing.
Yeah, definitely marketing when you're busy is a challenge. Even when you're not busy, it can be kind of
Exactly.
a challenge. So I know that firsthand just with my schedule. And I just want to say that I love that several of the guests I've had on Mark My Words, a lot of things you're saying here as we wrap up, common thread of just be yourself and be genuine in what you do. And I know I live by that motto as well in all of my work. And I love that that's becoming like a common thing that everybody's been saying.
I'll add one more thing, Mark, if I may, and that is, if I think back to the times in the boardroom and the showstoppers, I used to call them, and the egos of the people that just was all about them all the time. That's not a way to win any kind of, you know, strategy, or even not win, but earn respect, you know, and earn trust. You got to work together. We've all heard the whole I in team. So helping other people is really, really a great way to build that rapport and build that trust. And if you help people and you do it in such a genuine way because you care about them, they will believe that you care about their business, and they will come knocking, even if it's just for a quote, but it starts with that and then you go from there.
Well, speaking of connecting and providing help for people, anybody who's listening or watching this through one of my channels, how can they find you on social media? How can they connect with you?
Sure. So I am on LinkedIn, Mirella Scalise, and I'm on Facebook, also Mirella Scalise, and I'm on Instagram, mirella.scalise. And as well, I've got a Anything Goes page on Facebook. I also have another page called So Guess What? That's I haven't actually even promoted it, but that's part of my my group of companies, you know. And I've got a page there, and I'm always active. I'm always doing something, and I'm always checking in to see what others are doing, because again, you know, everybody's got a voice and everybody's got a story. I'm a story sharer and I'm a voice owner, but I'm a story seeker as well. And I've always been very curious and very inquisitive, and everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. And that's why I'm always so fascinated with everything. And you know what? When you understand people and their story, then you can do better business with them.
Well, I'll tell you, you have an incredible story. I
Thank
loved
you.
listening. I loved listening to you for the past hour, and I'm so glad I had you on this podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad you had me too. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, and I can't thank you enough for you sharing this with your audience live. And I can't believe that the whole idea of being live didn't faze me, except for my pop builder. It kept dipping down.
Except for a couple of Zoom glitches, but we're kind of used to those as well, and the unstable connection. But it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, Mark. Thank you so much again. And thanks for everybody that tuned in. What I'll do is a watch party on Facebook, and Mark, you can do one as well because I tagged you, so it should appear on your page as well. And
Awesome.
and people can join in. So thank you again so very much.
Well, thank you very much. And for everybody who's picking this up, like I said, follow Mirella, keep up with her because she's doing some amazing stuff. And
Thank you.
I love what you're doing. So thanks for being on Mark My Words. I appreciate it. And I'll be back soon enough with another episode, and hope to have more great conversations like this with you down the road. And
Oh, I look forward to it. I so look forward to it. Thanks so much, you guys. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.